Actually, I have one selfish question for you too. I'll be doing,
Yeah.
let's see, yeah, September, late September, I'll be doing my first backyard ultra. It's only 100 miles. I'm not like trying to push any crazy pace records or anything, but would you program for that any differently than, or let me rephrase that. How would you program for a backyard versus it's like just, I think it's like 1 mile loops too, as opposed to just
Yeah.
some of the longer stuff that I'm more accustomed to in terms of breaks in between, aid stations and whatnot.
Yeah. So the way I usually look at any event when it gets, because even ultra marathon has kind of got this characteristic in general where it's like, I'm training for an ultra marathon. How should I do it? It's like, well, are you doing a 50K? Are you doing a 250 miler? Are you doing a backyard? You're doing a timed event, trail, all this different characteristics. So usually I start with the event and start looking at what are the unique characteristics that will be optimal for reaching your goal there. So if it's like a backyard style event where I'm guessing it's like if it's kind of traditional, it's like 4.2 miles and you have an hour to complete each loop and you just kind of rinse and repeat every hour. Um, for that, I'm looking at a scenario of we want you to be completing that loop as close to that hour as possible but still giving you enough time to prep for the next one.
Okay.
So from the people I've worked with, that's usually probably like 50 to 55 minutes is a pretty decent kind of like zone to give you. I think like 5 minutes should be plenty in most cases. You might have like an oddball loop where you're like, okay, I'm gonna try to finish a little quick because I'm gonna like try to get something done that's a little more needy than I typically would. But I think most aid states and transitions can be done pretty efficiently in 5 minutes.
Yeah.
So like trying to get closer to maybe 55 than 50 in most cases, because we're just trying to minimize the workload required for each one of those loops
Right.
because a loop is a loop, whether you do it in 40 minutes or 59 minutes. So a 40-minute loop is just going to take on a lot
Right.
or a bigger workload than a 59-minute loop. So I think like avoiding kind of increasing your workload as much as possible is going to be the move. So then it's just like what makes up that. So if like getting to say, let's just say 55 minutes is our kind of standard target for per loop, what is it going to take from like a pacing standpoint or what combination of running and hiking is going to get you to 55 in a really efficient way. And once we can kind of determine that, then we start kind of programming in a way to work towards that. So with enough time, I would probably still start out with like a scenario of least to most specific in terms of what I would program. So I'd still have someone do like a speed work development phase early on in that just to kind of get for you, you might be unique with this because you're probably getting some of this stuff from cross training type activities. If I'm working with someone who's more or less like mostly wants to run and everything else is a little bit secondary, I'm going to have them do like short intervals and long intervals. And then once we're kind of through that phase, we'll start to kind of pull back on that intensity work and start working on the actual specifics that they'll use for that backyard loop. So let's just say, for example, we find out their pacing is going to entail a 50-50 split between like a real easy jog close to their real easy recovery run and like a purposeful walk or hike.
Okay.
I'm going to start building in kind of long runs that are kind of matching that sort of a 50-50 run walk strategy. If we can on a course that's kind of specific to the loop that they're going to be doing. Um, and just kind of like working on kind of how everything goes within that. I guess with a backyard, I'd maybe even like entertain like a scenario where I'm having them do like a structure similar to that, where instead of just going out for like say a 4 hour long run or something like that, let's actually do like 4 or 5 yards in practice just to kind of get down the repetition and kind of stress test the 5 minutes in terms of what they maybe would need and start to kind of figure out where some holes are in the approach and make sure that they have some like solutions to flex to if needed if things don't go as expected. So I'd still have someone do like a speed work development phase early on in that just to kind of get for you, you might be unique with this because you're probably getting some of this stuff from cross training type activities. If I'm working with someone who's more or less like mostly wants to run and everything else is a little bit secondary,